As we continue the coverage of the savage killing of 22-year-old Mercedes Vega, new details are emerging suggesting she may not have been the only target. We are going to speak with her parents, who knew her best, as well as a former NYPD detective, to try to uncover the truth and try to understand what happened here. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera birth control shots and were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. That's right, Morgan & Morgan is investigating claims that patients were improperly warned about this risk. It's free to check, just takes a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on screen, click the link below, or go to forthepeople.com/LCDepo to see if you qualify. We are continuing the conversation and the coverage of 22-year-old Mercedes Vega. Now, we reported about her relatively recently. This is all in connection with her 2023 murder that two men now face charges with. We have Jared Gray and Sincere Hayes. And then there's a third man, Cudjoe Young, who the sheriff's office in Maricopa County is recommending charges be filed against. That hasn't happened as of this recording. Again, all in connection to Vega's abduction, torture, and killing. But new information may suggest that Vega's killing may not have been an isolated act of violence. We are now learning that she is one of at least 3 dancers from Phoenix's Les Girls Club targeted in a string of armed robberies between 2019 and 2020. The case, which has stunned Arizona with its sheer brutality and cruelty, has slowly unraveled over the past 2 years, exposing a disturbing alleged pattern and chilling motive: silencing a witness. That seems to be the main theory here. Now, if you haven't been following the case, I'm going to get you caught up to speed. April 16th, 2023, Mercedes Vega was last seen on surveillance footage walking into her Tempe apartment parking garage. And minutes later, 2 cars were seen leaving that garage simultaneously: her Dodge Charger and a Chevrolet Malibu. And police eventually found her Charger about a mile away from the garage, bloodstains, but empty. The next morning, firefighters discovered Vega's body in the back seat of that burning Malibu along I-10. Now, the medical examiner confirmed that she had been shot in the arm, beaten, doused with bleach, which, by the way, was found in her throat, and burned alive, ultimately dying from smoke inhalation. For months, the case stalled. That was until November of 2024. That is when 22-year-old Sincere Hayes was arrested out in Tennessee. A fingerprint on a grocery bag in Vega's car allegedly matched his, and DNA apparently tied him to the scene as well. Prosecutors later announced that they would seek the death penalty against him, basically because of the depraved nature of this crime, and also potentially alleging that Hayes killed Vega to prevent her from testifying against Young in this armed robbery case that he apparently has been accused of. You see, Vega had identified Young as the masked man who robbed her in 2020, and she was set to testify against him, reporting indicating the day she was murdered. Now, her family long suspected retaliation, and prosecutors now argue that this killing was a calculated move to silence her. Young, a suspected drug trafficker, was free on bond at the time but wearing an ankle monitor. His trial for the robbery is set for later this month, July 29th. Now, before we talk about the 2 people who have been charged, let me first just take a step back, because there is new reporting from NBC News that is shedding more light on what may have been a disturbing pattern. According to police reports that were reviewed by the outlet and interviews with former dancers, this may have started years before Mercedes Vega's murder. November 2019, one dancer, who asked not to be named, apparently told police that she was robbed at gunpoint in her Scottsdale condo parking lot by a masked man, apparently matching the description of Cudjoe Young, or at least matching the description that Mercedes Vega gave of the person who robbed her, and that description has been matched to Cudjoe Young, at least that's the allegation. Now, she believed that she had been followed home from the club, but she says she was never informed if detectives actually pulled security footage from the club to see if she was being followed. Then, you go to November 2020. Another dancer claims that she was approached by a masked man with a gun in her garage. He apparently runs off when another car pulls in, and that incident reportedly was included in Young's armed robbery case file. Now we go back to the other suspects who are implicated in Vega's death. You have 25-year-old Jared Gray, whose fingerprint was apparently found on a cup inside the burned Malibu. He was arrested in Georgia, faces charges of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery. 29-year-old Kudjo Young, as I mentioned, going to be going on trial for allegedly robbing Vega in 2020. He is potentially facing charges because the sheriff's office is recommending he be charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The criminal complaints, according to Arizona Central, indicate that police were also able to get their hands on travel information, including purchases for plane tickets for Hayes and Gray to fly out to Arizona. And it is believed that the credit card information connects back to Young. Hayes reportedly told police he had, quote, business with another man out west, but wouldn't say who. Cell phone location evidence going to be critical in this case. Why? According to court records, the plane tickets were connected back to a cell phone number, and police were able to track it, showing that the phone was apparently following the same path the Malibu took on the day that Vega died and was in the area where her body was found. Now, Maricopa County investigators also reportedly talked to a man whose cell phone location was near the scene of the burning car. And get this, he told authorities that Young had called him to go, quote, pick up a package, which, according to him, apparently turned out to be two men, likely Hayes and Gray. So the court paperwork indicates that the man told detectives he was given the location as well as a car. He picked up two men, drove them back to the Phoenix area, and the man and Hayes' phones both apparently show them on I-10 in the hours after Vega's death. And police were also able to confirm that the phone number connected to the plane ticket purchase was the same number that called this unidentified man at around 2 a.m. And there's no word on whether the man who allegedly gave Hayes and Gray a ride is going to be facing any kind of charges, but interesting to say the least. Now, authorities believe that Hayes and Gray took a Greyhound bus together back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, but now they're going to be back in Arizona, this time in jail and eventually a courtroom. So I want to talk a little bit more about this. And first, I want to bring in Tom Smith, retired NYPD detective and co-host of the Gold Shields podcast. It's great listening if you're interested in a little bit more about investigative work. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time. It's good to see you. Excellent police work here. That's the first thing that stood out to me. When you are tying at least two, potentially three suspects to the brutal slaying of Mercedes Vega, and you look at the different layers of this investigation, cell phone records, fingerprints, DNA, excellent police work, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's where the credit should go to, because when you're dealing with a case like this, it's not easy. It's very meticulous. It's very time consuming because you're going from one thing to another, hoping there is another. So, nothing's laid out perfectly. So you're kind of searching for that next step. And because of the hard work that they did, they were able to connect all the dots in this case, which was remarkable. But like I said, Jess, very time consuming, very dedicated work for sure.
Were you surprised they were able to recover fingerprints and DNA material?
Not the DNA. The DNA is these days kind of not a given, but easier than it used to be. The fingerprint is always the mystery, is always the hold your breath kind of thing with crime scenes and collection of evidence, because it's so volatile, whether it stays on something or it's able to be lifted. And just because you lift something doesn't mean it's going to be identifiable. So to put all of that together and have it work out the way it did was great.
You think Young is going to be charged based on what we've seen so far?
Yeah, I think so. Because, my kind of view of it is talking to the other two, see what incriminating evidence you could get from the others that are involved in this to loop him into it. But I think in the end, yes, he's going to be charged with this for sure.
And the digital evidence is key, right? When you talk about, Hayes' phone showing the presence on I-10 in the hours after Vega's death, when you talk about the fact that the Maricopa investigators talked to a man whose cell phone location was near the scene of the burning car and told authorities that Young called him to go pick up a package. It turned out to be Hayes and Gray. And then you couple that, they were able to confirm that the phone number connected to the plane ticket purchase was the same number that called this other person at around 2 a.m., this unidentified man, again, the person who allegedly gave Hayes and Gray a ride. That is something that suspects can't escape. Is there any which way to say, hey, that data might be compromised, it's not reliable, or in your experience, that's not a winning argument?
Well, they're going to argue. They're going to give it a shot, but it's not going to work because the technology today that is at the hands of law enforcement is incredible. The ability to do that, not even pick up the cell phone of the bad guys, pick up other cell phones in there to create witnesses and go out and speak to them about what they saw or others in that area. The technology that's used today and the resources that law enforcement has is so great that when you get into cases like this, it's kind of rock solid because now these people, these suspects have to navigate through coming up with an alibi of why this technology and why these technical pieces of evidence are in front of them, which they can't do, like you said.
And I have to ask you about the attack. I mean, she was brutally killed. You're talking about beating. You're talking about shooting, the bleach down the throat, the burning alive. What does that say to you from an investigative point of view?
You can't put it into words what this young girl went through. It's just horrible. But the big thing, the one that stood out to me was the bleach down the throat. That's a message that is a absolute clear-cut message of talking or giving up, testimony or whatever it might have been later on down the line. That's been used in other cases that I've heard about and been involved with. That bleach thing is a horrible, and that was probably the first thing they did. And then the other aspects of her killing took place, which is just incredibly sad and, tough to hear about.
So you believe that this motive to silence a witness would make sense if that's what prosecutors decide to move forward with?
That's what I think happened. That was the first thing that I just put two and two together and came up with that because of, the past robberies and all that. The coordination it takes to pull something like this off is what they're going to piece together, which will lead to the absolute premeditation of this, which will, enhance the prosecution so much. But, that's what I thought was the past cases that are going to come up and taking care of her.
This pattern, though, this case revealing a pattern of prior armed robberies targeting dancers from the same club. A, how important is that for detectives to connect seemingly separate incidents? How does that affect the investigative work here? How do you think that's going to maybe affect a prosecution? And B, is that common? Have you seen something like that before where there's targeting of dancers when they leave clubs?
Well, not just dancers, people who leave clubs. And why? Because clubs close late. No one's around. Just the people in the club might be lingering around. That's about it. There's no vehicular traffic. There's very little, pedestrian traffic. So the ease in which victims can be targeted from either a strip club or just a regular club is really heightened in any big city or any area like that. As far as the investigation goes, it's always paramount to close other cases and to put cases together to show how dangerous these people are and the attitude that they have going after victims. It's always good to coordinate other cases into one so it just shows how dangerous these people are.
Is it difficult for an investigator in one state to coordinate the arrest of suspects in another state? When you're talking about this does have an aspect of multi-state investigative work and extraditions. Does that make it complicated or tough?
No, not necessarily. I've done it quite a few times where it's just coordination. It's getting in touch with the places or departments that person is in and just coordinating your efforts. And then once it's done, like you said, extradition hearings take place. Whether the suspect says yes or no depends on the next steps with court hearings and so forth. Most of the time when I've had to deal with it, the suspect has just waived it and then we just transport them back to New York. But each suspect is different. But the coordination is phone calls and just being in front of each other and coordinating these cases, which in my estimation, my experience has always worked out well.
So what do you think the next steps are? Because there's obviously to what information is gathered, what evidence is gathered to make an arrest and move forward with charges. Once someone's in custody, what's the next step now with respect to these two defendants and potentially a third?
Who's going to give what up? Who's looking for a deal? Who wants to get away from this? Who has the most to give up when it comes to the other's participation and what they can provide as a, state witness? That's certainly going to be the next step. You're going to see these guys just jumping at the opportunity to talk to the DAs, to have a day to sit down and explain what they did and maybe come up with a plea deal. No doubt about it.
By the way, assuming they did this, they're all innocent until proven guilty. Let's be clear. However, assuming they did this, there is an aspect of trying to outsource it, right? There is an aspect of trying to cover up evidence, whether it's the burning of the car or whatnot, taking her car, putting her in another car, there's surveillance footage. Doesn't it seem to you in your experience, again, assuming these allegations are true, that the people who spend the time trying to cover things up and the people who involve more players and try to outsource it and not do something directly, the more breadcrumbs they leave, the more evidence they leave behind? I don't know if you want to call it sloppy or whatnot, but, from an investigative point of view, it seems they are giving a lot for authorities to work with here.
Oh, sure. Listen, the more people, the better, because the more people have something to lose and the more people want to stay out of trouble. So this wasn't surprising, and that's what I mean by who's going to flip first, who are you going to approach first? And in my experience and what we always did was, if you have three of them, who's the weakest link? Who has the most to lose? Who can give up the most? Who's the most scared? And that's who you're going to approach first. So, the more people, the better, because someone out of this is going to flip. Absolutely no doubt about it.
We'll wait and see. Tom Smith, thank you so much for coming on. I hope everybody can check out the Gold Shield Show. I encourage everybody to go check it out and see a little bit more of the work that you do. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jess. Always a pleasure.
So I am joined by two special guests right now. I'm joined both by Erica and Tom Pillsbury. These are Mercedes' parents. Thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate it. First of all, Erica, it's been some time since we last spoke. And for both of you, how are you doing at this point? Because a lot has happened since we last had an opportunity to speak. How are you both doing? How's the family doing?
It's still hard every day. We miss her. There's days that we feel like we can get through okay, and then there's days where I just have to miss her. But we are happy to see that justice is slowly moving in the right direction, and that we're hoping that we will get some peace for her and for our family with the way things are moving. Obviously, it's extremely slow and it's a little frustrating, but we think we'll get there. We can see a light at the end of the tunnel, I guess. It's a long tunnel, but we can see it.
It's difficult to be happy and sad and angry and frustrated all in one emotion, because I'm happy that these people we're finally going in that direction, but I don't want to be happy because I don't have my daughter. Like Erica said, it's still frustrating because it is very slow, but we've got a mental state that we're going to be years before we actually see a verdict on this case, because with the state pursuing the death penalty on Sincere Hayes, now does that mean they're going to pursue the death penalty on the other two defendants? I don't know. I've asked that question. No one can give me that answer. It's just going to be a lot of things. We do know that they're going to eliminate Sincere's case number and then eventually put all three as co-defendants on one case number.
Just to clarify, did you get word that Young has officially been charged? I know that there was a recommendation that charges be filed. Do you know what the status of his case is, besides obviously the robbery case with respect to your daughter? In terms of, I know the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office has recommended conspiracy charges with respect to what happened to your daughter, but do you know what's going on with that?
Officially, we don't believe he's been charged. We know he's being held and he's not getting out. And I know they were waiting on some DNA that we just found out yesterday or the day before that they got back that confirmed some of the things that they had thought. Not sure officially what that was, but what they were waiting on in order to put the charges through. The detective called us and said that it confirmed everything that they thought. And so I'm sure it's going to happen at any moment. We know that Jared Gray has been charged and a warrant's been put out. We believe he's fighting extradition, but eventually the detective will go and pick him up and bring him back to Arizona. We did see that there was some warrants on him just last week. So I try to check it every once in a while, try not to obsess too much about it because I know that it's going to happen. Sometimes it just makes it harder if I keep checking and keep looking. But we do know that he will be charged.
Yeah, I think they'll charge Cujo when they bring Jared Gray back. I think because then they'll have all three here in the state of Arizona. Because I asked that question, how can you put it out to the public and then not follow through what you're telling the public that these people are accused of and not arrest them or charge them? And I didn't get an answer to that because to me, it doesn't make sense. If you put it out there where everybody can see it and hear it, and then you haven't officially charged these individuals, well, how can you accuse them of something without actually charging them?
And when you saw the arrests of Hayes and Gray, when you saw the evidence that has been laid out linking them or allegedly linking them to the crime, were you shocked? Were you like, who are these two guys? I can't believe, the DNA, the fingerprints, the cell phone records. What was your reaction to all of that?
Well, we had thought from the beginning that Cujo had something to do with this. It was one of the very first questions that I asked the detective when they came here and told us she was dead. Before we knew anything whatsoever about what had happened to her, I said, what about the guy that she wrote that statement about, that she had picked out in the lineup? And they, at that point, said, we don't know. We don't know anything. They didn't even tell us that she was burned alive. We found that out on the news. But I mean, it was one of my very first questions. And so hearing the Cujo's connected is not a surprise. Jared Gray is a name we had never heard before, but finding out that he's connected to Cujo is not a surprise. And that Sincere, Cujo, and Jared are all connected is no surprise to us whatsoever.
The hard part I have about that whole thing is, like you were asking, were we surprised, is that these people were young and that they had never been to Arizona and that they flew here to do what they were told to do. And they're in their 20s. They're giving up their lives and their kids' lives for ultimately a cell phone and a couple $1,000s because Cujo either asked them to come here or I'm assuming, he paid for them to come here. He put them on the bus to go back. I just don't know how someone ultimately at that age could let somebody influence their lives to do the things that they did to my daughter. And that's where I struggle with it, is because she didn't know them, never met them. I don't know how they were able to even get that close to her. That's why I believe that there's still more people, because they weren't from here.
There's something that really kind of struck me, that it was a big eye-opener to me, is they had flown here, I believe it was March 3rd, and they had been here for over a month trying to get to her. And this was the 11th hour. This was the night before she was supposed to testify. And I think that's why it was done so sloppy, because they were like, it's now. We have to do it now, or she's going to testify tomorrow. And so they were sloppy and they were stupid, and they've been trying to get to her. And I'm so proud that she, was looking over her shoulder and being safe that whole time that they were trying. They tried. And then they tried so many different ways to kill her. And ultimately they had to burn her alive because she wouldn't die. They couldn't catch her and she wouldn't die. They're just fools. I mean, obviously they're fools. Otherwise they wouldn't have done what they did.
Yeah, it's shocking and heartbreaking and disgusting all at the same time. And I can't imagine what you and the family are going through as you have to hear these details and live through it. NBC did this report, and we talked about earlier, that Mercedes was one of several dancers who were apparently targeted over the years, followed back home, or robbed, or attempted to be robbed. What did you make of that? Because they're talking about a pattern here, and you wonder about whether or not it's going to be a part of whatever criminal case follows. What was your reaction to that?
Well, we knew she danced a couple of nights a week. We knew it wasn't her life and she wasn't there all the time. We weren't happy that she was doing it, but we were understanding and we still supported her and loved her. And she had so many other dreams. When it came to that happening at the club, we don't blame the club. They have been extremely supportive and helpful. Lay Girls has given footage and DNA records and given information to the police and worked with the police.
We also don't know how many people were involved. We do know that there's another woman that was involved in what ultimately was the main reason why he was caught, because he was caught on video. He didn't actually rob her because somebody showed up. His car was caught there. It was odd to hear that it had been going on, but I understand why young women didn't come forward, because they didn't know who it was. They're probably worried, kind of like what happened to Mercedes. So to hear that this had been going on was very frustrating, because honestly, Mercedes had no idea, because she would have said something to us on the lines of like, girls are getting robbed when they leave. I think it was kept quiet. I don't know all that, because one thing, when I would go see her, I would get mad at her if she parked in a certain place. If she had money in her purse, I'd be like, you can't do that. You know, you need to pay attention to what's going on around you. And she never once had told me, you know, a couple of girls that got robbed. I don't think people came forward until after the fact.
After Mercedes
Yeah,
did.
I think people started to say, okay, well, this had been going on. I believe it had been going on for a while, and they were just afraid to come forward. Because I only know of 2 other cases.
Did she ever express that she was scared? I mean, did you know that she was about to testify? Did she say that she was scared? She was looking around her shoulder. Did she mention anything strange?
She wasn't
was
afraid
happening?
to testify. She
Okay.
wasn't afraid to testify. I feel like she had the law on her side and she knew she wasn't doing anything wrong, and she felt protective. And, you know, I taught all of my children, you know, look over your shoulder, be careful. We found the safest place we could think of where she would live. And we believed that, you know, she was the only one who would stand up and say, nope, that's him, and point him out. And everybody else was too afraid, obviously for good reason. She's the only one that's dead. But after she came forward, then more people came forward, and then the club became more aware, and then they became more protective of the girls that worked there. And Mercedes made sure that everybody knew and everybody was safe. And she had no fear in pointing out. And no, she did not express that she was afraid at that time whatsoever.
Yeah. In fact, he went back to the club after doing that. And that's how they got him and arrested him. I think in the beginning, when she came home, she was terrified.
Oh, yeah.
But because this is why in the beginning, I didn't think he would be that stupid to wait to the very last minute to have something to do with this when it happened, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. I think that it kind of got in the back of her mind because it was 2 years ago, and it wasn't like, oh, it just happened last week or last month. It was 2 years ago. That's why if you see the video, she's walking out with her phone because she felt safe and didn't feel threatened. Because if she did feel threatened, I think she would have noticed.
She also told me that she at that moment had believed he was in custody.
Yeah.
And by the way, real quick, this unidentified third person who may or may not have picked up and dropped off Hayes and Gray. You have any information about who about what's going on with that person?
No.
We don't know. We believe that person's obviously working with the police in order for them to have that information. I mean, I can go through and speculate by looking at the associates that Cujo was arrested with or Sincere was arrested with, and, who their roommates were and who purchased this and that. We do believe that there's at least one, if not two people that are speaking and if kind of coming forward and saying, This is what happened. That's how they figured out who was purchasing the tickets and
right.
And who purchased the vehicle.
Well, yeah, I believe the guy that purchased the vehicle, especially under a fake name, I believe that he might be someone that's of a point of interest for them or communicate, as a witness. But I do believe, like you said, I know that there's at least 2 to 3 more people. Right now, the only thing the state can prove is these 3 people. And it's going to be very hard to prove that these other people knew what was actually going to happen to Mercedes.
Putting aside now the criminal case, how do you want people to remember Mercedes, and how can they support her memory living on? If they want to help in some way, they want to know more about Mercedes, what can you tell them?
Mercedes, she was a protector of so many people. She was so strong. We've been discussing things that we can do in her honor. We never want her name to be forgotten. Some of the girls at ASU who are going to school for criminology, I've been speaking with them, and we've been considering things that aren't always considered when it comes to protecting yourself. Like, park on the top floor of the parking garage. You're going to have more lights, more cameras, and they're not going to abduct you from the top floor and spiral down 6 levels with you in the back of their car. Simple little things like that. Obviously, sharing your location, having a buddy, there's little things. But sometimes we think of these little strange things like, oh, yeah, I should park on the top floor. We're trying to start kind of that consideration. There's been a lot of women that have come to me and said, hey, I've been followed, I hid. This is what worked for me. Obviously how to protect yourself a little bit better. That's what Mercedes wanted to do. That's why she came forward. Mercedes wanted people to know what was going on so they could protect themselves.
One thing I want from this is, and I felt this from the beginning, is that because Mercedes danced, that she was judged because she was danced. And as you probably are more aware of this than there are so many young women that are kidnapped and killed that are in this industry or doing something that society may not think is perfect or whatever. I just want people to know that no matter what you do and who you are, you do matter. And that's why we fight for our daughter, because I want every woman, if they're like the criminals, that if there's multiple women that got robbed, I want them to be not afraid and be able to step forward. I don't think, and I believe this to my core, if my wife and her friends had stepped up, we wouldn't be sitting where we're sitting now. Because when it originally came out, people were like, oh, it was a drug related. Oh, she was doing in a bad situation. Oh, and it was immediately judged her. And that's what I worry about society. And that's what I want people to take from this. Just because she did what she did 2 nights a week, she was a beautiful young woman. And this was easy money for her. And she realized that this is not what she wanted to do. And there could be other cases that are out there where people don't feel they're getting their justice because of what their son or their daughter did. And I want people to understand that you have to be that voice and you have to be there for them. And that's ultimately what I want for my daughters, is to show that you can step forward even in the darkest times and you do matter. And to see the people come forward and want to talk about her and it just explode. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be sitting here talking to you or anyone else about my daughter, ever. I thought that this would be this very quiet case and that would be the end of it.
I wish you weren't. I really do. I really wish we weren't talking about this. But listen, I think you both said it so perfectly. We will continue to follow this. We will keep attention on this. Erica and Tom Pillsbury, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and generous with what's going on as these cases progress. Again, our hearts and our prayers go out to you and the family as you go through this, and we wish you nothing but the best moving forward. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.